ότι πριν 30 χρόνια που είχα έρθει στην Κύπρο, όλοι που εφεύγαν από τα πανεπιστήμια, το όνειρο τους δυστυχώς στην Κύπρο ήταν να μπουν είτε στο δημόσιο είτε στις τράπεζες. Αυτή τη στιγμή, βεβαίως, οι τράπεζες δεν είναι οι πιο, τέλος πάντων, καλοί εργοδότες με τις αλλαγές που βλέπουμε, αλλά πιστεύω ότι έχουν οριμάσει τα πράγματα στην Κύπρο ώστε να μπορέσουμε να προωθήσουμε τους νέους μας να ασχοληθούν περισσότερο με την επιχειρηματικότητα. Διότι ένα μεγάλο πλεονέκτημα που έχουμε σαν χώρα είναι οι γνώσεις που έχουν οι άνθρωποι μας και εγώ θεωρώ ότι μπορούμε να κάνουμε πολύ περισσότερα. Έχουν γίνει αρκετά βήματα τα τελευταία χρόνια, έχουν δημιουργηθεί αρκετά startups και έχει αρχίσει να δημιουργείται το ecosystem, το startups ecosystem στην Κύπρο, αλλά θεωρώ ότι ακόμη έχουμε δρόμο. Okay. Θα κάνω τη διάλεξη στα αγγλικά, αν δεν σας πειράζει, γιατί είναι στα αγγλικά τα slides μου, αλλά βεβαίως μπορούμε να μιλήσουμε και ελληνικά στις ερωτήσεις ή οτιδήποτε. So basically, I would like to thank everybody for being here. The subject of the basically presentation today is raising equity for startups, how you raise equity for startups, and what investors wish to see. So basically, as I have basically on both sides, I have raised money for startups, but I'm also a startup investor. I put all the experience I have to show you the slides and give you some insight in the startup world. So basically, what is the biggest problem for startups? Startups, they usually need considerable funding before reaching break-even at the end of the day. So somebody comes up with a new idea, they need to spend quite a lot of time and money to develop that idea into a product. Until they develop into a product and monetize the product, by saying monetize, start earning revenues from that product, they basically need a lot of funding. And this is where the investors come in. So this is the major problem for startups. The other, of course, problem is that 9 out of 10 startups eventually fail. So they are risky. I mean, everybody hears about the successes of startups, but nobody hears about the failures. This is common in the world. But the reality is that only 1 in 10 startups are successful. That doesn't mean that somebody shouldn't try to do a startup because basically, you know, I mean, you might try 2, 3, 4, 5 different business and to get it right in the end. So this is another problem which makes people generally reluctant to invest in startups because it's not like a brick and mortar investment, for example, investing in real estate where you buy, let's say, an office and you start earning revenue from the beginning and you have sort of more certainty of revenue. Of course, on the other hand, if you invest in startups and the idea is successful, you can make your money several times. I would say that generally people who invest in startup funds, they expect to make from exits around, I'm talking about venture capitals, between 2 and 3 times their money on average. Now, if it's a huge success, people can make multiple of that, like 10, 20, 30, 50 times their money. The third problem, of course, that the Cypriot startups fail is that the startup ecosystem in Cyprus is still developing. And one of the main things that I would say is currently underdeveloped in Cyprus is financing. I mean, everybody hears about how successful Israel is. One of the reasons that Israel is so successful in startups is because it has significant funding from abroad. There's so many Israelis, Jewish people that are based in the US, for example, and all these people, they do invest in startups in Israel. So financing is a very big part of a successful ecosystem. So I just wanted to give you some facts in general. Obviously, the USA is the leading country by the number of startups. Most of the startups, they do operate in the area of fintech. I mean, you're going to hear these terms like fintech, proptech, shiptech. They just take the first word and then just they add tech. The reason for this is because if you think about it, the financial services industry was the easiest industry to start being digitized. So a lot of people, they do invest a lot of money in fintech, in financial technology. And actually we see the sort of competition that legacy banks face nowadays. So for example, we see all these startups like Revolut, for example. Revolut is the most well-known company in, I would say, fintech, in banking, that basically is competing. They're competing with traditional banks, and they are stealing business from them. Actually, for Revolut, I saw a statistic that there's hundreds of thousands of people who have a Revolut account. So if you think about it, Revolut is already stealing a lot of business from our traditional banks. The highest valued private startup in the world is ByteDance from China, 75 billion startup. A large percentage of companies, they do start as home business. So somebody, they start their own business from home, and then they raise their first funding, they go to an office, and it develops. Only about 40% of startups, they actually manage to become profitable at some stage. Obviously, competition is a big challenge. And actually, a big percentage of startups, they have less than $25,000 when they start as a business. And the last point, which I think shows the current developments, is that artificial intelligence is currently the most promising area. And artificial intelligence, of course, is everywhere, including the medical sector. I mean, everywhere artificial intelligence is present and will become part of our life. So if we look at the next slide and we go on the right-hand side, and we see this chart where it says, why do startups fail? And it says 90% of startups, they fail within the 10 years. So what are the main reasons for failure? Obviously, the first reason is that there's no market need. I mean, at the end of the day, if you do a product that nobody wants to buy, you will fail. And this is actually a very common thing in startups. If somebody comes up maybe with a great idea on paper, and then they develop this great idea, and they don't manage to monetize, to actually start earning money from that idea. So this is actually the biggest reason for failure of startups. Or somebody comes up with an idea which is already there, or they come up with an idea which basically exists somewhere abroad, but for some reason it doesn't work in the market you choose to target first. The second reason, of course, is cash. I mean, at the end of the day, you make a projection and you say, I'm going to develop my product in 10 months. I'm going to launch it in the market in 3 months after that, or 6 months after that. And then from month 18, I will start earning money. And by the end of 2 years, I will be break even. And suddenly there is like 6 months delay. Usually delays that come from IT. And you need, the money runs out, of course, and you cannot raise any new funding. This means that basically you will run out of cash. So you either put your own money or you go bust. Another reason, which I think is extremely important as well, is not having the right team. I think you need to have a mixture of people with different skills to have a successful startup. So you might have somebody who is very good technically. He starts the business, but he's not a good manager at all. If he does not find people that would help him to manage the business, or people with complementary skills, he might have a great product. The product might be at the verge of monetization, and the business might still go down. So, I mean, you can draw some conclusions from all this. The first one, obviously, you need to do considerable research before launching a product, a startup, because a startup means that you are coming up with an idea. And when we say a startup, what is the difference between a startup and a new business? A startup is something that has considerable potential for growth. I mean, this is the difference between opening basically a kiosk or a cafe and creating a startup. A startup means to be an idea that will be expandable, that you will manage. Basically, it will have a lot of potential, and you might manage to make a lot of money or earn a lot of revenue in the future. The other thing, of course, is that cash is king. I mean, you see so many businesses now in the US that they have billions of dollars of capitalization and they're still not profitable, but they have a lot of cash, basically. So somebody believes in their idea and they're willing to finance them until eventually they will become profitable. So cash is more important than profitability. So cash is really the key. You do need a good team. Competition, of course, and pricing, they are important factors to consider, because if you're going to come up with a product that already exists in the market and is selling cheaper than you, you're bound to fail. I think one of the encouraging things that came up from this list is that location, after all, is not that important. And I think this is quite encouraging for Cyprus because you see so many people saying that, we're based in a small market and this is one of the main reasons we cannot succeed as a startup. I do believe that good ideas, now with the globalization, they do have a good chance of success. We see some startups that started from Cyprus managing to get money from abroad or being included in big accelerator programs abroad, like the one recently for the company called Malog. I managed to get funding from Y Combinator, but some other startups as well. So yes, obviously Cyprus or the location might be a limiting factor, but it doesn't mean that you cannot be successful. So basically, what are the options for funding? I have included also these small quotes, which I believe are quite interesting, actually. So basically, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And this has to do a lot of the startups. Obviously, when you start a business, I think the obvious source of money is yourself. I mean, you do have some savings. Your dream was always to start a business. Maybe you're working somewhere, you got a redundancy package. And, the natural source is to put your own money. And a lot of time investors, when they will invest in your company, they will look whether you invested some money yourself at the beginning. Somebody who comes up with a great idea, but never invested a single penny in his own business, sometimes investors are not very pleased with this. So self-funding is the obvious source of funding, and also like bootstrapping means using your own resources. I mean, if you have, like, for example, your garage and you use it as office, or you have your own equipment. So things like this, together with self-funding, it basically means using your own resources. The second obvious source is like friends and family. So, if you just graduated from university and for some reason you have somebody who's really rich and he was at the same course with you, maybe you can go to them and share the idea, and maybe they're willing to, to fund the idea for you. Or if you are somebody who starts a new business at the latest stage of your life and you have friends, you go to them and you share your idea, you get funding from them. Of course, another source could be your family. I mean, you go to your parents, you go to your sisters, brothers, immediate family, and you can ask their funding. So yes, I don't know whether parents would be very pleased with graduates coming to them and say, dad or mom, can you please fund my next business after you paid, I don't know, 100,000 euros for my education? But it is a common source of funding. The third source, which obviously has been developing in Cyprus quite a lot, I would say, over the last few years, is the route of incubators, accelerators. So basically, you go to an incubator, which is like an organization that can do two things for you. One thing is to provide you with some cash, but I think the other thing, which is quite important, is to provide you a lot of training. So, you're somebody who has not done or started a business before, your own business, you need a lot of training on how to set up your business. You need support, you need office space, you need some free resources. So you go to these incubators, accelerators. The other one, which actually is very, very common abroad, is that of angel investors or business angels network. So what are these business angels? So basically, these are people who are usually high net worth individuals. They have a lot of money to invest, or they have spare money to invest. These people, they are interested in investing in startups, so they form their own clubs, okay? So they form these business angels clubs. These clubs, they might be non-profit organizations, or they might be like profit organizations. So it may be somebody coming up with the idea, forming a club, inviting some people who they know that they have the resources to invest, and start presenting ideas to these angel investors. And then you have basically a group of these people to invest in a startup together, and obviously help the startup expand, or even share these ideas with other of their friends. So angel investors is a quite common source of investment abroad. It is usually done when the company is at the seed or the pre-seed or seed phase, but you might, because these are smaller amounts, usually it's like 25, they start from 25,000 euros and they go up to, I don't know, 200,000 euros. But you might see angel investors invest in larger amounts as well. In Cyprus, when you have one business angels network, actually, which hasn't been very active lately, but I'm pretty sure that as the ecosystem develops, they will develop even more. I think the government needs to give some more incentives to angel investors. The next source, of course, is crowdfunding. I mean, crowdfunding is becoming more and more popular with people. So crowdfunding, basically, you have these specialized platforms where people that can actually go and register and upload their own pitch deck, basically their information about their startups, and collect money from people who are actually members of this crowdfunding platform. So the role of the crowdfunding platform is to do some initial due diligence on this company. So when you try to raise money through these platforms, they will usually ask you to send them the information. They will review the information, and then they will come back to you and let you know whether you're eligible to be listed on that platform or not. And crowdfunding basically can take place raising either equity or raising debt, or even some ideas. Like there are some platforms where somebody wants to launch a product and they actually go and launch their product on that platform. And they say that, the people who give me small amounts of money and help me to launch this product, they will receive one of my products when it's actually launched. So I think people, they have become quite inventive in this. In Cyprus, we actually have only one crowdfunding platform registered, if I'm not mistaken. It's actually something which has to be licensed by the Cyprus Securities and Exchange Commission. So if somebody wants to start a crowdfunding platform, they need to get a license from the regulator, so that investors who register, they go through a process of AML and all these kind of controls, and they are knowledgeable investors. The sixth form, of course, is that form for venture capital. These are usually funds that invest in the whole, I would say, the whole spectrum of startups, whether they are pre-seed or seed or Series A or Series B. Usually for startups at the seed level, you have to find a VC which is willing to invest at this stage. I would say normally venture capital funds, because they invest larger amounts, they tend to invest in the expansion phases of a company or on the seed phase of a company. But there are some VC funds that they also specialize on pre-seed. Usually these funds, they get funding also from the government or from the European Union, European Investment Fund. I will tell you a couple of things about that afterwards. Another source, of course, is a loan. But, if you want a loan, you know what you have to do. You have to go to a bank and put a mortgage. And but there are people who actually go and make loans to have a startup. One source of revenue or funding, which has been quite, I would say, popular and increasing in Cyprus, is government programs. And I will say a few things about government programs afterwards. These are programs from the government, for specific programs for seed and pre-seed. They actually launch these programs. A lot of new business, they apply to these programs. And some of them, they get selected and they get funding from the government. And the government usually finances around 80% of the expenses of a startup. And the last one I would like to say a few things is, of course, commitment to a major client. So let's say that basically you came up with an idea, you are an expert in a certain field, you have somebody who worked with in the past, is a major client, you go to them and you say, guys, I will be developing this great product for you. Are you willing to fund it? And then you're going to have the first ride, or you're going to get a discount. And if these people, they really believe in your skills, they might actually fund your company to develop the first product, provided, of course, they have some rights after you develop the product. So I do believe that this can be, a source of funding. Now, what is the funding process? What are the stages in funding of startups? I'm sure that all of you heard about the famous Valley of Death. So if you see these various stages, and then of course, if you see the graph on the left-hand side, you have the seed capital, which goes together, let's say, with the pre-seed, then the early stage, later stage, IPO, and public market. So if we start with the pre-seed and seed capital, basically the Valley of Death is the risk, is that you're burning money. Actually, when we say burning money, is that basically you spend the money you have available until you break even. So if you don't manage to break even before your money runs out, basically you die. This is why it's called Valley of Death. So I would say that the most critical, or usually the most critical part for a stage for a startup, I would say, is the seed capital phase, the pre-seed and seed capital phase, where you actually manage to raise usually money from friends and family, your own money, from angel investors. And with this money, you need to manage to produce a product, okay, and go to the stage where you actually manage to go close to break even or go close to break even. And then, of course, you get funding at different stages, which this funding will help you to expand even more. So usually on the early stage, after you have proven you have a proof of concept, so you have a product there, which is actually being monetized, and then you have some sort of break even, you cannot go and apply usually to venture capital funds and get funding for expansion purposes. So if they really believe in your product, they will give you money to develop further your product, to get into other markets. So they will give you the expansion capital. So if you look on the table on the right, you start with the pre-seed. Pre-seed is usually you need money for the proof of concept. So you came up with the idea and you say, I have this great idea. I can do this platform where this is an idea which is already done 1,000 times, but let's say people will lend each other. Okay, some people will lend their money on this platform. So I need to build the platform. So I need some money for this idea to prove my concept that this idea is working. So I get some money and I develop my product. And I develop a draft product, basically a prototype, or I come up with this great idea about some sort of industrial design. I develop my prototype, and this prototype is actually working in the way I described it that it would work. So it's proof of concept. I have a product that is working. Then, of course, I need further money to develop my product and actually reach the stage where I will be able to market this product. So then I go to the seed stage, where usually you raise around $500,000. Of course, more of this is in the more developed markets. In Cyprus, it could be even smaller amounts. And you actually get money to develop your product, grow your company, and reach the stage where you can actually, sell, market your product. And then, of course, you get then Series A, Series B, Series C, different levels of funding depending on your business model, to increase your revenue, to expand it to new markets, maybe some expansion capital before IPO. But the reality is that when you get an investor, a VC fund as an investor, which usually you get on the seed or on the Series A stage, these investors, they tend to stay with you for more than one funding round. So if you manage to get money from a VC fund, even at the seed stage, you will know that these VCs, they will also come and invest with you in additional rounds as well. Because basically these companies that they have a lot of potential, they rarely, they would be raising money for a number of years. Okay, so you come up, you develop your product has traction, but then you say, I want to increase my users even more. So I raise more money, I spend more money on marketing, I add a lot of users. And then, basically investors pile up, even though you might not be making money as such, but you actually show that you have traction. So you gain a lot of users, and they say that, okay, this guy is getting a lot of users. These users have started monetizing. They're starting being monetized. They started spending money on the product. And at some stage, this company will earn a lot of money. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you will break even before people or large funds they start to fund you. I mean, take the example of Revolut. Revolut, I think they only had like one quarter where they showed even some profit, but they're still getting money, and the valuation is in the areas of billions. some words about the incubators we have in Cyprus. We have actually a number of incubators in Cyprus. We have the Idea Incubator, which is the incubator funded by Bank of Cyprus. They run a program every couple of years. Actually, they had one just recently, or is still running actually, where they invite people with ideas to enter the selection process, and then they select a number of companies, and they actually give them training and funding. The same goes for the Cyprus Seeds, which basically Cyprus Seeds, I would say it focuses more on research-oriented projects that they fund with a combination of private money and money they get from the government. So they promote these kind of companies as well, and they have cooperation with universities. You have incubators like Aris, which is related to Cyprus City is from private. It was funded originally from private entrepreneurs. Aris is from Deloitte, so that's another incubator. You have Chrysalis Leap, which is basically led by some university professors. You have Gravity, which is a private incubator. Gravity, so it's an incubator which actually gets equity stakes in companies, help them to develop, and would, of course, the potential, help them to get funding from the government. Usually they invest in companies which are in deep tech. So you have a number of incubators, accelerators in Cyprus already. So somebody who has an idea can actually go and investigate whether they can get some sort of funding from these incubators. Of course, somebody might apply to an incubator abroad. I mean, I saw one of the companies in PropTech from WireFS, basically that they managed to join the PwC UK startup program, and they managed to get some money from abroad. Or, of course, Malloc, which they were enrolled in the Y Combinator program, and they get a lot of money from this US famous accelerator. So it doesn't mean that you can only apply at resources in Cyprus, but you can also try some incubators, accelerators abroad. Of course, the most natural course is to try the local accelerators first before trying abroad. Now, you can always, of course, go to the government programs. The government has a number of programs that they have increased over the last few years. I will start with the Research and Innovation Foundation. I would say that the Research and Innovation Foundation is more focused on deep tech kind of projects that are very research oriented, but they have actually, during the last few years, they have these pre-seed and seed programs where they have also funded companies that in the general startup, I would say, sector. So this is an area where you can actually get funding. They do announce programs on a regular basis. They actually had a program for seed and pre-seed funding of 100,000, 500,000, and 1 million that just started on the applications ended on the 14th of February. If you go on the website, you can find information about the kind of companies that are being funded. And they actually fund a lot of research-oriented programs as well. So I do think that it's a quite interesting source of trying to get funded. The second source of funding is actually the Ministry of Energy, Commerce and Industry. They do have some kind of programs like new entrepreneurs programs, young entrepreneurs programs, digitization of business. So basically, you can definitely get some money from those programs if you meet the criteria, of course. Some of the criteria, I think they need to be changed. Like, for example, like the Young Entrepreneurship program, they said they ran out of money now. They launched it some months ago. One of the criteria is that you need to be employed somewhere, or somebody is self-employed, they cannot apply to this program. So I think some of the criteria they have, they definitely need to come closer to the market. I'm actually part of responsible for the startup committee of the Tech Island. And one of the things we want to do is basically get in contact with the ministry and try to get some of these programs to be more aligned to be suitable for startups. Then, of course, you have the Ministry of Labor, Welfare and Social Insurance, where they run these programs for new people entering the market. So these are quite useful programs. I mean, for the startup, one of the startups or the main startup I'm involved, we have actually utilized these programs for employing graduates from software developer graduates from local universities. So we have employed 2 people until now that we have enrolled to this kind of program. So you get funding until these people are basically trained. So these are basically programs you can investigate and you can actually get some money from these programs. The last one I have included here is the European Investment Fund. Now, I'm sure, or I don't know, or maybe you should try and do some research for Greece. Greece is definitely a success story when it comes to startups. I don't know whether you've been reading the news about some of the companies like Viva Wallet, which was purchased from JP Morgan, another company which was purchased from Facebook. So we see a number of companies, startups that they are being sold at very high valuations, so they attract really large investors. Actually, Greece, they did a joint program with the European Investment Fund, and they gave money to VC funds that they were investing in new startups in Greece. And this program has proved to be very successful. A number of very good startups originated from this fund. Okay. So I know that the government of Cyprus is actually trying to launch a similar program now in Cyprus to allocate an amount of more than 20 million to funds that will invest this money into Cyprus startups. Okay, so I think this will definitely help the ecosystem in Cyprus. Of course, now if you talk with investors in Cyprus, they say, of course, it's always a chicken and egg problem. They say, yeah, we don't have enough startups in Cyprus, and startups in Cyprus say we don't have enough basically funding in Cyprus. But I think all these initiatives together, they will help to create a more complete ecosystem, startup ecosystem in Cyprus. Now, I have also included in this on this slide a number of platforms that you can actually go and have a look. Some of these platforms, they are only for European Union companies. You can go there, you can see what sort of projects can get funding. I think it's quite interesting, and I'm sure that it can be a very interesting source of funding for Cypriot startups as well. Now, what are the financial instruments? I wanted to say a few things about the financial instruments that people can actually use to raise money. So you do your pre-seed, you raise some money, you create a product, then you go and launch, or you want to create a company, and you're looking for funding. So, I mean, what sort of instruments are you going to give to the youth to raise funding? I mean, the obvious one, the most easy one, is to use equity. Okay, go to somebody and say, I will give you 10% of my company that has this idea. If you give me, I don't know, 100,000 euros. And then, of course, when you have companies at the seed stage, or even pre-seed or a seed stage, it's always a question of what is an appropriate valuation. I mean, what is the valuation of your company? Somebody might say, you know, your idea is only worth, I don't know, 50,000 euros. Somebody might say, I mean, usually the founder might say, no, my idea is worth 2 million euros or 3 million euros. So this is usually one of the problems with startups, that you know how much you sell your equity for. And this is the reason that the market has actually developed a number of other instruments that they overcome this problem. And you see, I will try and explain the other 3 instruments that they were developed, but they have been developed by the market. The first one, of course, is convertible securities. The second one is SAFE, simple agreement for future equity. And the third one is keep it simple security, or KISS. Not to confuse it with the Valentine kiss. I want to go to the next one. So basically, if you go to convertible securities are actually instruments that they convert into equity, but at a later stage. So convertible securities, they can be either debt, convertible debt, or convertible equity. Convertible equity is usually called preferred equity. These kind of instruments, they can have interest. For example, somebody might have preferred shares that they might convert in 5 years, or sorry, they might convert in usually they don't have an expiration, the preferred equity. They might convert when the company actually raises equity, and they bear an interest 7% or 6%, which is cumulative. So they start with the value of €1,000, and then they accumulate the interest as well. Or you might have convertible debt. The difference between convertible debt and preferred stock or convertible equity is, of course, that debt has a maturity date as well. So you issue a convertible debt that will mature in, let's say, 2 years, and it has an interest of 6% for these 2 years. And at the end of the 2 years, it will either be converted or the investors, they get their money back. So it's very popular for startups because they're very flexible. They don't need to set a valuation, and they have minimum legal costs. So instead of having this argument that, you know, my company just started, it has a great potential, don't tell me it's only worth €200,000. You say, okay, I will issue you this instrument, which you will get for the next 2 years 6%, and you will be able to convert you will be able to convert your debt at a valuation of, say, 4 million, like the example I used on the right-hand side. Your debt will convert. There will be a conversion event. If I raise equity from somebody, you will be entitled to convert your debt at that stage into equity. So usually these kind of instruments, they have a valuation cap. They have a discount or a qualified financing term. When I say valuation cap, let's say I'm an investor and somebody says, okay, you will sell me a convertible debt. And I put my money, and suddenly in 3 years, the investor says, okay, my valuation now, I'm raising equity is €100 million. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I put my money, I made this company $100 million worth company now, and I have to convert my money into equity at a valuation of 100 million. Okay, usually there's also a discount, let's say 20%, but still, when I invested 3 years ago, I took a lot of risk. So I wanted to make some money at that stage and not basically only get 20% discount. So usually there is a valuation cap. So I tell the investor to entice them. You will get this instrument that will get 6% debt. There will be a valuation cap of 4 million. In 2 years. And also usually there's also a qualified financing term. It means that basically usually this kind of instruments, they convert automatically into equity when a company raises equity. You know, there will be a term that the company will need to raise at least 1 million equity for your debt to be converted into equity. Otherwise, if they raise €1,000, it would be converted into equity. So basically, if you look at the example I have on the right-hand side, you have a company which issued this kind of debt. At the expiry, basically, it's a kind of instrument that has a 4 million euros cap and a 20% discount. So if the company is worth 3.5 million euros at the expiration, and the new investors, they invest at 3.5 million, you have the opportunity, of course, to invest at a discount of 20%. So you invest at a valuation of 2.8 million. If the valuation is 4.5 million, you get to your 20% discount, you have the opportunity to invest at 3.6 million. But if the valuation for the other investors is at 6 million, because you have the cap, even though the 20% discount takes the valuation to 4.8 million, you only invest at the cap, which is 4 million. So these are the kind of instruments which investors use. Now, because this kind of convertible debts had some drawbacks, and one of the main drawbacks of this instrument, of course, is that it's debt. At the expiration of this, if it's a convertible debt, the investors, they have the opportunity to say, I want my money back. Usually, if the investors, they want their money back and they don't get equity, it actually means taking out the plug out of the company, so the company goes bust. So usually there is an extension, but let's say the investors, they don't want to give you an extension. They can actually force you to give them a much cheaper valuation, if you think about it, if the company cannot find alternative financing. So actually, this famous Y Combinator accelerator, it came up with this instrument, which is called SAFE. I think they wanted to say it's a safe instrument, but it actually comes to simple agreement for future equity. So instead of being a debt, it's actually when you have investor, he gives money, and what he gets, he actually gets a promise, or it's an agreement that when there is an issue of equity, they will also get equity as well at a discount. So I give my money to a company, and when they issue, the next time they issue equity, they might issue the equity, I don't know, 10 million valuation. There's usually a discount in a valuation cap, but let's say the valuation cap is 10 million and the discount 80%, I can actually convert my money into equity at a discount of 20%. And of course, the advantage for the company of this instrument, not for the investor, obviously, is that it's like a warrant. It doesn't have an expiration date, so it doesn't put pressure on the company that they have 2 years to raise equity so that they can repay the convertible debt. And they sometimes come up with this most favored notion that it says that if the company issues at the latest stage another safe, the first safe is amended to reflect the terms of the later issued safes if it has better terms than this one. Of course, because the market evolves on the market, some other people, they came up with this other instrument, which is called KISS, keep it simple security. So KISS can take two versions. It can either be a debt version, where it has interest rate and maturity, or it can be an equity version. If it has no interest, no maturity, it's of course very similar to a safe note. The difference with the safe note, the first difference is that it's a transferable instrument. So somebody buys a safe, they can actually sell it to somebody. Whereas with the safe, it's an agreement between two parties. You cannot sell it to another party. So you have the safe, it's a private agreement between two parties. You cannot transfer it. But a KISS is an instrument that can actually be transferred. So I think this makes it even more valuable in a sense. So they usually come with additional terms. If it's a debt one, it has an interest rate and maturity. It always has this most favored notion term. So they have sort of standardized terms so that they're more easily transferable. And they usually convert when the company raises at least 1 million financing. So what do investors want to see? So you go to an investor, you prepare your presentation. What do investors want to see in a presentation? So usually, I mean, I have included some of the terms here. They want to see that you have a clearly defined business model and an idea. I mean, you go to them and you say, you know, we raise money. You need to show that you have a very clear business model. This is my product, and this is how I will monetize. Okay, because if you go there and say, I have this product, I don't have a clue how I'm going to sell this product, obviously the investors, they will not be very much interested, because the investors are always thinking, how are we going to make money? Okay. The second thing, of course, you need to show them your team's capabilities and experiences. I mean, usually investors, they prefer people who launched successful startups before. So if you launch the first successful startup, you're more likely to launch another successful startup. So I think this is a very important thing. Or you might be people who never launched a startup, but you have significant capabilities. You are an expert in certain fields. You have worked in and accumulated valuable experiences. So they want to see that. They want to see what is the potential market. I mean, where are you going to sell this product? If you already launched your product, they want to see whether you had traction. I mean, you actually convince people buying your product, or you convince people joining your platform, or you gain users, active users in your software. So I think this is quite important. Many times they want to see whether you're willing to put skin in the game. I mean, you go to them and say, I need 100,000 euros. And suddenly they ask, okay, how much money are you putting yourself? And you say, you know, if you don't put any money, investors, they look at it skeptical. If it's a completely new product, they want to see whether you have a proof of concept. I mean, it's something that, I mean, you have a prototype. You go to them and show a prototype. This is my product. I have the prototype, and now I need money to develop enough quantities to market to the market. They need to see a clear exit strategy. I mean, if you go to them, say, yeah, I want guys, I want you to give me my the money to create the business of my, dreams that I will pass on to my kids and the kids afterwards. The investors, they want a clear exit strategy. Okay, if you want to keep the business, you have to buy them at the end of the day, or you have to say clearly that you're willing to sell the company or to go public. I mean, they want to see an exit strategy. Okay, sorry. So a pitch deck normally contains, as I said, a vision and value proposition, an explanation of the problem you're trying to solve, or basically why you're launching this product. You see a gap in the market, and this is the reason you're launching the product. Your target market and opportunity. Usually investors, they are more convinced if your product can go global. So if you say, I'm going to launch this product that will sell in Paphos, only Paphos, I'm saying Paphos because I am from Paphos, they will not be very much convinced because obviously you don't have a lot of potential. What is your proposed solution? What is your revenue model or business model? They need to see a traction and validation roadmap, of course. So basically how you will attract users into your product, how you will validate your product. So I will use, for example, social media. I will give trials to university students. I mean, these kind of things. A clear marketing and sales strategy, how you're going to sell your product, information about your team. They definitely want to see some financial projections. Now, I have to say caveat there. I mean, usually financial projections, they don't usually come true. So you have to really convince them about the basis of your projections. They want to see what competition is out there, and of course, what you will do with their money. I think this is extremely important as well. So I'm trying to leave some time for questions as well. The last thing I wanted to show some practical tips from my experience anyway, as both an investor and somebody looking for investment. When you go and try and raise money, you have to have a clear strategy. Don't go there not being sure what you will present to the investor. You have to clearly explain to them, basically, what is your strategy? What is the product you are selling? You have to have a clear idea about the product and how you will make money out of that product. Okay, so if you go there and say, I have a great idea, but I don't have a clue how I'm going to monetize this product, you will not convince them to go there. If you go there and you don't have a clear strategy of how you're going to promote your product, again, you will not convince them to put money. So these are the kind of things I'm looking. Another, I think, practical idea, if you lack certain skills, I think it's always a good idea to go and try to find some kind of strategic investors. I mean, that they will actually bring into the team, the missing links, the missing parts of your strategy. So you might include somebody that has financing experience that will help you to to manage the finances of the company, but also help you to raise money. And of course, you have to listen to their advice, because many times you manage to get this kind of investors, but you don't listen to their advice. You have to show commitment. So if you go there and say, guys, give me 300,000 euros, I will get a salary for 50,000 euros per year. I mean, the investors, they will start laughing. I mean, what are you looking for? I mean, somebody to finance your salary for the next 3 years. You have to show commitment. You have to show that you will actually sacrifice hours and being underpaid or not paid at all, or you would put some money yourself. So this is something they want to see. You have to make realistic estimates. Don't go there selling big ideas. I mean, you can sell the potential, but when you actually make financial projections, you have to be realistic, because a lot of these people, they are actually experienced, or they will look at similar companies. They know the target market, you say, and they will say you're bullshitting them. You have to be transparent. I mean, don't. I mean, I had the experience of a startup trying to raise money, and they went there and they came up with this model where they needed 3 million. But then when they got the investor interested, they said, yeah, we've got to say that we need another 2 million for additional equipment. Then the investor basically said, I will not invest. That's one thing global. I mean, yes, I mean, you might launch a product for Cyprus, but you know, Cyprus is a pilot market. I mean, you have to think of ideas that they're expandable. You know, at least from Cyprus, think of maybe to expand in Greece as well, which is a bigger market. I mean, Cyprus is a good pilot market, but you know, it has to be an idea which is expandable. And of course, investors that don't feel comfortable if it's a one-man show, including their one woman or man show, but I've had one-man show or one woman show, whatever. Basically, if you're only one person, the investors, they start getting uncomfortable because they're thinking, I'm taking a lot of risk on one single person. So if something happens to this person, you know, what's going to happen? Yes, usually the case is that you have one guy or one person, one girl who is a driving force behind the business, but they always feel more comfortable if it's a team. So I think this is the end of the presentation. I wanted to leave some time for questions. So Ioanna.
Yes.
So we can do the questions in Greek actually if you want. Μπορούμε να μιλούμε στα ελληνικά. Or we can use them in, if somebody is English speaking, I can answer in English.
Είμαστε έτοιμοι για ερωτήσεις.
Ναι, μπορώ να πω εγώ.
Ναι.
Γεια σας. Ευχαριστούμε, κύριε Δημητριάδη, για την παρουσίαση. Είναι εξαιρετική.
Κωνσταντίνος.
Μάλιστα.
Ο Κωνσταντίνο είναι καλά αν μπορείς να ανοίξεις και την κάμερα σου.
Ναι, φυσικά.
Ωραία.
Ωραία.
Γεια σου.
Χαίρετε. Από τη μία πλευρά λέμε να think big and think global, να το πούμε κάπως. Την άλλη να μην υπάρχει η παρουσίαση σε πολύ μεγάλων project. Ουσιαστικά κάτι το οποίο μπορεί να λειτουργήσει την δεδομένη στιγμή, είναι κάτι το οποίο πρέπει να ξεπεράσει κάποια όρια ή η παρουσίαση που πρέπει να γίνει στον potential investor, investors, πρέπει να είναι κάτι το οποίο να υπάρχει απόδοση, να έχει λογική και ουσιαστικά να δείχνει και το πώς θα κάνεις recruit τους clients, αλλά και πρόσθετα τι service, exceptional services θα δώσεις που δεν τα παρέχουν οι άλλοι. Ποιος είναι ο κίνδυνος στην προσπάθεια παρουσίασης αυτού του opportunity, αυτής της ιδέας, να υπάρχει η δυσπιστία από τους investors. Δηλαδή, από τη μία, ναι, να θες να παρουσιάσεις έναν μοντέλο, μια ιδέα η οποία να είναι accessible παγκόσμια, αλλά από την άλλη να πρέπει να δείξεις down to the earth και να δείξεις να μην είναι πολύ complicated το investor idea σου.
Νομίζω, εντάξει, καταρχήν, όταν λέω to think global, σημαίνει ότι να κάνεις projections για όλη την παγκόσμια αγορά ή να μπορέσεις αμέσως να κατακτήσεις την παγκόσμια αγορά. Νομίζω όμως όταν κάνεις κάποια projections, μπορείς να δείξεις τα projections σου σε σχέση με τα resources που να πιάσεις. Για παράδειγμα, να πούμε, πες ότι κάνεις launch ένα software ή αν πάρω εγώ το startup με το οποίο ασχολούμαι εγώ, το οποίο είναι gaming startup, το οποίο έχουμε κάποια παιχνίδια. Εντάξει, τα οποία κυρίως την αγορά, στιγμή η αγορά μας είναι η Κύπρος και η Ελλάδα. Αν πότε να ανοίξω και άλλες αγορές, σημαίνει ότι πρέπει να χρησιμοποιήσω resources to market my product και στις άλλες αγορές. Σίγουρα, ένα πράγμα που να με ρωτήσει ένας investors, το παιχνίδι που κάνεις μπορεί να πουλήσεις και σε αγορές εκτός της Κύπρου και της Ελλάδας. Ναι, μπορεί. Όμως, τα projections που σου δείχνω για την ώρα είναι για τούντες αγορές, επειδή έχω τα resources να κάνω launch σε τούντες αγορές, αλλά το ίδιο το μοντέλο, με τα resources που να πιάνω gradually, και που σε ένας σαν επενδυτής, μπορεί να γίνει expanded και στο εξωτερικό. Οπότε πρέπει να βρεις το σωστό balance. Σίγουρα όμως, για να μην αποκλείσω, μπορεί κάποιος να κάνει ένα product που μόνο για την Κύπρο και να είναι, για να μην παρεξηγηθώ, να είναι successful, ας πούμε. Δηλαδή το footy, σίγουρα υπήρχε και σαν ιδέα και στο εξωτερικό το footy, και όμως ο πρώτος που έκαμε το footy, ή μάλλον μπορεί να μην ήταν ο πρώτος successful που έκαμε το footy στην Κύπρο, κατάφερε και πούλησε το σε έναν καλό μάρτυπο σε μια εταιρεία του εξωτερικού. Μπορεί να κάνουμε και τα. Σημαίνει ότι μπορεί να είναι μια ιδέα που υπάρχει στην Κύπρο και ακόμα και η Κύπρος να μπορέσει να την απορροφήσει και να είναι profitable για τους investors. Σίγουρα πρέπει να βρεις το σωστό balance. Usually όμως, οι investors είναι more enticed όταν μια ιδέα μπορεί να είναι και expanded εκτός της αγοράς της Κύπρου, με την έννοια ότι η Κύπρος είναι μια μικρή αγορά. Με την έννοια που το λέω. Όχι με την έννοια ότι μπορεί να δουλέψει. Αλλά το παράδειγμα του Φούτη, τη fits, τούτο που ακριβώς είπαμε για το Think Global. Ήταν μια ιδέα που έγινε και δούλεψε πολλά καλά για την Κύπρο. Μπορεί κάποιος να κάνει μια παρόμοια ιδέα, αλλά μια ιδέα είναι. Να σου δώσω άλλο παράδειγμα. Sorry, από στα γλύωρα. Εγώ επένδυσα σε μια ιδέα που έχει να κάνει με κουπόνια και cashback. Δεν θα πω ονόματα εταιρείων ή οτιδήποτε. Η οποία όμως είναι, η ιδέα είναι ότι στην Κύπρο και στην Ελλάδα, κυρίως στην Ελλάδα με πιο μεγάλη αγορά, ο κόσμος έχει χρησιμοποιεί πολλά τα discount coupons. Οπότε στο εξωτερικό όμως είναι μια ιδέα που είναι πάρα πολλά widespread στην Αμερική, το cashback. Όποιος σπουδάζει Αμερική, στην Αγγλία είναι γεμάτος ο τόπος. Στην Κύπρο και στην Ελλάδα όμως είναι πολλά common το πράγμα. Αν πετύχει, μια από τις εταιρείες, οι δυο από τις εταιρείες που να πετύχουν στην Ελλάδα είναι να καταφέρουν να μεγαλώσουν. Προσπάθησα να σου δω κάποια παραδείγματα.
Ναι, ευχαριστώ.
Okay. Έχουμε κάποιες ερωτήσεις. Εκμεταλλευτείτε την ευκαιρία να ρωτήσετε ό,τι θέλετε. Άννα, έχεις ερωτήσεις?
Σε μένα που απευθύνεσαι?
Ναι.
No, it was a fantastic class. Really enjoyed it. Μου έρχεται κάτι, για να είμαι ειλικρινής αυτή τη στιγμή. Αλλά στον προηγούμενο listener, I would like to say that I agree with Mr. Dimitriadis, and you should have confidence. You should believe in yourself. You should be humble, but again, you have to think globally and think big. Because only if you think big, then you can reach your dreams where you're aiming. It doesn't have to be that big, but when you think globally and when you think big, you will definitely reach a satisfactory point.
Thank you, Anna. Μάριε, μπορούμε να διανύμουμε αυτά τα πολύ χρήσιμα slides σου στους φοιτητές μας?
Σίγουρα. Ας σου στείλω έκανα κάποιες μικρές ορθογραφικές, μικρές διορθώσεις. Να πω ένα γενικό, απλώς για γενικά το τέλος. Εγώ θεωρώ ότι έχουμε πολύ potential στην Κύπρο για entrepreneurship, generally. Απλώς πιστεύω ότι πρέπει να μπει στο mentality των φοιτητών μας, στο mentality του κόσμου, ότι they can actually go and try to start their own business. So many people abroad, they start their own business. Και είναι μόνο σίγουρα ξεκινά από φοιτητές να μπει μέσα στο mentality μας, διότι δυστυχώς, όπως είπα στην αρχή, στην Κύπρο πάρα πολλοί κόσμος πάει σε πανεπιστήμια ή ξεκινά με το mentality να βρω μια δουλειά στην κυβέρνηση, να βολευτώ κάπου κτλ. Εγώ πιστεύω ότι έχουμε κόσμο με πάρα πολύ potential and they have to try. Usually για τους πιο νεαρούς είναι πιο εύκολο to try and fail παρά για κάποιον που είναι at the later stage. Αλλά ακόμα και I see people at later stages of their lives that they are actually trying their ideas and they are being successful. And I really believe in entrepreneurship. Διότι πιστεύω ότι μπορούμε να το αναπτύξουμε σημαντικά στην Κύπρο, μπορούμε να κάνουμε ένα πολύ καλό ecosystem με startups στην Κύπρο, μπορούμε να προσελκύσουμε funding και να έχουμε και εμείς success όπως ήδη έχουμε κάποια success, αλλά ακόμα παραπάνω όπως στην Ελλάδα, ας πούμε, που άρχισε το πράγμα πριν 4-5 χρόνια και αναπτύχθηκε τόσο πολλά. Οπότε, it's up to us και ένα σημαντικό κομμάτι, νομίζω, παίζουν και τα academic institutions και τα προγράμματα που κάνετε εσείς. I have to say they are very, very good. Congratulations, διότι βοηθούν τον κόσμο να μπει στο entrepreneurship mentality και να φύγει μακριά από το mentality του employee. I mean, myself, I was an employee for 25 years and I'm really enjoying being an entrepreneur as well. So I really think that it's worth trying. Αλλά σίγουρα it depends on the person as well κτλ. Αλλά θέλω να πω ότι είναι κάτι που αξίζει τον κόπο να βοηθήσουμε να αναπτυχθεί παραπάνω στην Κύπρο. Τούτο ήθελα να πω.
Just want to add that.
Yeah. Sorry.
I just wanted. Yes, please. So we should give it to the audience. I just wanted to comment on that something, but I can add up to this later.
Andrea?
Yes. Hello, Marius. Good to see you again.
Hi, Andreas.
I would like to ask about this very big change that you did. You were so many years in the private sector, then you joined the public sector, and then now you are in this entrepreneurial journey. What do you think are the main differences, especially with the culture that we have in Cyprus? I believe most of us live it, the mindset from our family, from the school, from the university, and then even in the private sector, where most of people are actually drive you to go far away from taking any risk and starting something on your own.
Okay. Okay, what I would like to say for a start is that okay, I want to be very careful how I phrase that. I think generally speaking, in Cyprus, we are quite conservative people coming to this entrepreneurship. I mean, abroad, you see so many people taking risks at different stages of their lives. One of the reasons that we are so conservative is because, of course, we're a small economy, and the lack of an active job market means that people, they might leave their jobs, try and be entrepreneur, and then find it difficult to get back on the job market. So I think this is also one of the reasons we don't see so many entrepreneurs in Cyprus. So this is why it's always easier for young people to do entrepreneurship. But what I'm really, I believe, and I'm really happy, is that we see a lot of new companies now being developed, especially in Limassol, that are related to technology, because the people who go and work for these companies, a percentage of them, they will be future entrepreneurs, because they will go and work for these really successful companies, fintech companies, gaming companies. These people, they started from somewhere, and then they will get ideas to start their own business. So I think we need basically to become more entrepreneurship. And when we actually speak with our kids, I don't want to talk like somebody who's an older guy, because I consider myself still young, but I would say we have young kids, teenagers, where, I mean, I'm trying to tell my kids that they should actually try and try things in the private sector, and why not in the entrepreneurship sector? I mean, entrepreneurship, it can be the private sector, and then entrepreneurship, or somebody might start try an idea from the beginning, or they might go to the private sector, get some ideas, and then go there. What I wouldn't advise people is not to go to universities and have this idea that they want to go and work for the government. I don't have nothing against the government. I think it's a great employer. It's a very, very good employer. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't suit your mentality and your character, don't go and do it. Because if it suits you and you're the kind of person who wants to be, it doesn't mean that you're not ambitious, but you want to have the 100% security, go and work for the government. But I've seen so many great people working for the government, and basically, because it's a very structured environment, it kills any initiatives that they might take. I don't want to, I might sound a bit, but I want to be honest with you guys. If you go and work for the government, it's a very structured environment. So I think that we need to encourage our young people to try definitely towards the private sector. We have so many great minds, and we have a lack of good personnel in the private sector. Because I'm involved in a number of private companies, they're always complaining that they cannot find good people, especially in Limassol, because a lot of the good people, they go and work for the government, or they go for this certain environment, and they prefer to get a much lower salary at a certain environment rather than try the private sector and get have much better potential, but also do their own thing as well, which I think it needs to be encouraged probably from home and at school. So one of the things that we want to do as an initiative at the Startup Committee of the Tech Island is also go and speak with the Ministry of Education and try and introduce this entrepreneurship lesson at high school as well, not only at university, which again, I would say, guys, you are doing a great job at university. So yes, if you're asking me my opinion, I don't want to say about what I regret, because you should never look back, but definitely, I think the environment now with the technology is much more friendly towards people that started their own business. When I was like finishing university 30 years ago, yes, 30 years ago, yes, thinking, sorry, 28 years ago, it was basically much more difficult to do your own startup. Now things are much easier with the technology. People, they can do things if they have a good idea, and they can access the whole global market very easily. So the capabilities and the prospects and the potential nowadays is much more than before. So this is helpful, but also I think you know, it has to start from the schools, it has to start from the families, it has to start from universities.
This is also something I wanted to mention, because it comes down to the ecosystem and the network that you have. So it's important to understand that you should look globally, to expand globally, but also as a Cypriot citizen, you should also try and enhance the entrepreneurial ecosystem and understand that entrepreneurship is a multidimensional topic, and it involves factors, and funding and knowing where to find the funds to fund your idea or capital is important. But if other links in the entrepreneurial ecosystems are weak, like social norms or policy and etc., then funding it's not the only issue. So it should be something that we should be looking into the weakest parts and try to enhance them collectively, and think in entrepreneurship as something that can contribute the local economy. And like Mr. Dimitriades said, think about the talent, where can you find the talent, give incentives to people so they can embrace entrepreneurship, spread awareness from young age, and try and educate the community about this amazing thing. We should all think entrepreneurially, because in today's day and age, with so much uncertainty and the fast pace, you never know what happens. So we need to adapt, and having an entrepreneurial mindset helps a lot. So, but the entrepreneurial ecosystem, your support system, it's very, very important. Where you can participate in government-sponsored programs, or you can apply for grants, where you can find talent, where you can find mentors, and etc. So everything plays a role, and everybody has a role to play.
Okay.
Hello.
No, Andrea. No.
Thank you, Mari, for before. Another question that I have. Usually successful founders are founders who have a safety net, and they are able to come back from it, right? And successful founders are usually founders who were not successful before, because they did the mistakes, they learned, and they came back up. And there are many, I think one of these things that is keeping us back in Cyprus is that we are a bit underdeveloped as a nation yet, compared to the other countries, and we have the need and desire to be close to success and be considered successful. So we are avoiding risk. And I would like to get your thoughts about when you have the founders in front of investors and they're trying to get funding. How can they get funding if they haven't had this ability to risk something first, start up something new, and then they're coming just with a new idea? They don't have how do we say, in background as entrepreneurial people, and they haven't created something before. That, I guess, will be the usual case with someone from Cyprus.
Yes, but this is why you have the incubators, accelerators, basically that they also train people, because they don't only give them money. They usually take them through all this process so that they get the skills to be able to present in front of investors. But also, you might have an idea and actually go and find somebody that you think they can help you, as like a mentor, which is a very common thing abroad. I mean, they actually go and seek people that they actually have knowledge to help them to grow their business. There is, if you check out websites where they advertise board positions, for example, you'll be amazed how many companies they seek basically investors, directors who will put some money in the company or not put money in the company, but they will also provide guidance and their own abilities and help in growing a company. Now, coming back to say something about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, okay, is not for everyone, but I have to say something, okay, though. Even if you are not an entrepreneur to create your own business, if you work for the private sector, you have to have the entrepreneurship spirit to be successful. So, you know, you might work for a company. If you have this entrepreneur spirit, you will be more successful. Now, of course, you're telling me, you might tell me that somebody might be a type where they're great at maths and they want to be locked in a room and develop their own models. Of course, I mean, entrepreneurship is something completely different. But as a skill is useful, I think, whether you have your own business or you don't have your own business. I was just trying to say that people generally, they need to take more risks in their lives, in their business, in things like this. And I think that for young people, below the age of 30, I would say, it's safer in the sense that they don't have a family to support. For older people that they have family to support, is always starting to get more heavy. But this is where the government sponsored programs, they come in. The government needs to support more new entrepreneurs, okay? So I saw this kind of programs where they say for young entrepreneurs or for new entrepreneurs. I think they're quite useful in the sense that there was a program for the Ministry of Commerce for people below a certain age that they never had a business before. And I think this is quite useful. I mean, you see so many people now leaving the banking sector, for example. Some of them, I'm sure they can develop their own business. Now we're talking in general. It might not be a huge success, that's something that would be multi-billion dollar, but it might be something to develop their own business. They might get help from the government. Anyway, I don't know.
Thank you. Just also something very interesting is that I think the most successful startups are for 40 years old and up, people who founded these companies. I think there's a statistic that is saying that the older you are,
it's usually people who, I think it's not only with the age, but it's with experience. Usually people who tried before and maybe they failed, or they launched the first successful enterprise and then they launched the second and third and fourth and so on.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody wants to ask. Vasily, you want to ask a question?
Yes, Maria, thanks for a quite insightful presentation. I have a quick question. So when talking about entrepreneurship and startups, a lot of times we refer to tech and fintech. So from your experience, to which extent is a prerequisite to have an IT background, or you need a strong IT person in the team when you have to put together the next startup?
Can I tell you my own experience?
Yes.
Okay, my own experience. Okay, the main startup I'm invested in, both myself and my partner, we are not IT people, okay? All right, but we have some of obviously IT background. Okay, it's more difficult if your business is a technology oriented business. Yes, it's helpful to have as one of the founders or shareholders somebody who is a software developer or knows how to develop these systems, but it is not a prerequisite, okay? So I have invested in a business where there are two partners. One of them is a business one and the other one is an IT. Oh, yes, what I see is much easier for them to get new versions of the product, and they feel more secure when they negotiate with when they subcontract something, because they know what they're talking about. But it's not a prerequisite. I mean, it's not something that is essential, but it makes life easier, I have to say. But having said that, I don't know whether we have any IT people here. IT people, they have their own mindset. So yes, I mean, if you have somebody on the team who has IT background and your team has to do with software, obviously, you know, it's great, but you might not have somebody and you still can make it, but it's useful. It's more useful when you have somebody. This is my own experience.
Thank you, Maria. So if I build a bit on this one, have you seen from your a nice composition of such a team? Like maybe you need some more commercial people and some finance people and some IT background. Then you have a nice mix, which on one hand, the chances of being successful are better. Number two, maybe the investors potentially can appreciate some diversity in the core team rather than being just IT people or non-IT people at all.
Okay, again, it depends on the person. Somebody who's an IT might be also very commercially minded. So, I mean, I don't want to, you know, put etiquettes on people. I think a diversity of skills, complementary skills are always useful. I mean, I see it, I see it from my experience that we have different skills with my partners. So that is always very helpful. For example, he's clueless when it comes to financing and funding. And I have this thing of some stage that it is accountancy background qualification, which is always helpful anyway. Having a financing background is helpful. It doesn't mean it's essential. So yes, complementary skills is something which is very good in a team, because sometimes you get a team of guys which they might be great IT people, but they don't have any sales skills or commercial skills. So how are they going to think? How are they going to commercialize a product? Or you might get a team where they might have a good salesman and a good IT person, but they don't have a clue about handling the finances of the companies. So yes, but always, I think always, if you have a good team of people and you're missing some skills, you can get, this is where you need help from maybe some angel investors who have the skills, or from an investor who has the skills, or maybe you go to an accelerator and acquire some of these skills. And this is the role of the accelerator, to give you knowledge about these things, so you complement this kind of skills. So yes, I think it's nice to see a complete team, but it's never the case. I mean, usually it's small teams of 1 or 2, 3 people, that it doesn't necessarily mean they have you will never find the perfect team. Anyway.
Thanks a lot, Maria. And thanks again for the presentation.
Hello, thanks a lot for the nice, informative. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thanks for the very informative presentations. I have a couple of questions. One is about mentorship, as you mentioned before, which I think is very critical in, let's say, early startups. And what I can share as an experience, or maybe a lack of experience, is the channels, whether there is any specific channels to, let's say, take out those mentorships and maybe find the appropriate persons to discuss maybe the ideas, get some valuable insights and or experiences in areas like how do you grow from a particular, let's say, status of a startup to the next level. So I was just interested whether there are any specific communities or some kind of events, let's say specific events for such kind of let's say either networking or sharing of ideas that could potentially allow mentorships in a way.
I think the university has mentorship as well.
Yes.
Okay.
But I think you have two kinds of mentorships. You have, I think, again, I will say it again, initiatives like the universities, which I think is a great program. It has a number of mentors that you can actually go and speak with them. You have mentors in these incubators, where all the incubators, they have a number of mentors that you can go and listen to their advice. They also include people who started their own startups, and some of them, they're quite successful. Or the second layer, I would say, is even people who invest in your company. I mean, like business angels networks, I think this is something we really need to develop in Cyprus. And this is a discussion we had today at the session we had for the committee for the startups. We need to develop further things. We listed a number of initiatives. One of them is networking. So we are thinking of, we are ready to launch an initiatives where we will include the Cypriot ecosystem into one of the international platforms. So these companies, Cypriot companies, they will have the opportunity to have access to international investors, to organize a number of events that we will bring potential investors together with startup founders, but also we want to find ways to create business angels network. I mean, train people, and I think there's so much money in Cyprus, and only people in Cyprus, usually they have this thing where they all invest in real estate. I mean, Cyprus, they love real estate. They love to see. They love to see these bricks and mortars. They invested in a flat. They invested in this. The dream of every Cypriot to retire, have 50 flats that they get rental, and this is their retirement thing. Okay, fair enough. But I think as a matter of allocation, I mean, if I take myself, for example, I have a portfolio which includes real estate, includes listed equities, but it also includes some money apart from my own startup. Some money I have also invested in other 2 startups. So yes, I mean, I think people, they need to be trained, and this is one of the other things we want to do. We are doing an initiative with the CFA, and maybe we can do something with the university as well, to do some kind of initiatives that we train people that are actually high net worth individuals or people who are interested to invest in startups. What are the risks of startups? How they invest in startups? What sort of instruments they might use? So I think this is something we have to do also in Cyprus, because we have to make people to be interested to invest in startups. Okay, and I think this is quite important as well.
Thanks a lot. And another one, very short one. Usually startups start on the side as a project, let's say, and people maybe have a 9-to-5 work, and then they work on a project on the side, and then they see this materializing a bit more. So that's a more theoretical question. When's best to jump out of the corporate, let's say, world and do it fully? Would you recommend, let's say, to get some traction, maybe, and revenue, or get some investors and then you do it? Or would this seem a bit odd to investors if you are working in parallel?
Do you think anybody would give you the money to somebody who has another full-time job? I mean, you know, you might start your project, you might have a project to do it part-time, but when you actually go and get investors, you have to be willing to commit that you will go and work. Or maybe it's a number of partners, and one of them is working full-time, but the other 2, they have to be able to commit. So yes, you need, I mean, when I invest in a company, I always look at the commitment of the founders. If it's the founders, they are not committed, then they have another job and they get the 3,000 euros or 2,000 euros per month salary. You know, this is like a game for them. If it works, it works. They become millionaires. If it doesn't work, tough for the investors. So I think this is your answer.
Yes. Thanks a lot, Mario.
Thank you, Nicola. I think we are at the end.
Αχ, συγγνώμη, είχα και εγώ μια ερώτηση.
Σταύρη, παρακαλώ.
Αυτό που θέλω να ρωτήσω, δεν ξέρω αν υπόθηκε κάτι και δεν το κατάλαβα προηγουμένως, όσον αφορά την διανοητική ιδιοκτησία, να λέω σωστά τον όρο.
Intellectual property.
Ναι, δηλαδή είναι ρίσκο για τον οποιοδήποτε να πάει να παρουσιάσει μια ιδέα που μπορεί να χρησιμοποιηθεί, ειδικά αν είναι και μια καινοτόμα ιδέα. Καινοτόμα, ναι. Λοιπόν, οπότε ποιο είναι το κόστος, ποια είναι η διαδικασία, αν θα μπορούσες να...
Εντάξει, κοίταξε, κανονικά, καταρχήν, να πρέπει να ξέρεις ότι τούτος που του παρουσιάζεις την ιδέα είναι κάποιος ο οποίος potential investor. Δεν θα την παρουσιάζεις στον ΑΒΓ, αλλά σίγουρα, usually you get them to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Τώρα, an NDA to give them a lot of information. Αν δεν υπογράψουν NDA, να τους κάνεις μόνο at a high level παρουσίαση της ιδέας σου. Πάντα έχεις το ρίσκο κάποιος που να του παρουσιάσει την ιδέα να την αντιγράψει. Δεν υπάρχει αμφιβολία, αλλά εντάξει, νομίζω να πρέπει να κρίνεις και πού παρουσιάζεις την ιδέα σου. Θα την παρουσιάσεις σε κάποιον ο οποίος εντζετζίνος σαν entrepreneur και μπορεί να κάνει copy την ιδέα σου, ή θα του δώσεις όλες τις πληροφορίες. Εν νομίζω με το να κάνεις ένα high level presentation χωρίς υπογραφή NDA να μπορεί κάποιος να κάνει copy την ιδέα σου. Να πω κάτι όμως generally speaking. Στο software είναι πολύ πιο δύσκολο να προστατεύσεις πάντα τις πατέντες σου παρά στο να κάνεις μια εφεύρεση γενικά. Οπότε...
Ναι, σε αυτόν αναφέρομαι. Ναι,
μιλάς για software.
Ναι.
Δυστυχώς το software μπορεί να βγάλεις μια ιδέα και να σε αντιγράψουν οι Κινέζοι μέσα σε 3 δευτερόλεπτα, ας πούμε. Τώρα πραγματικά υπερβολή. Αλλά εντάξει, νομίζω πρέπει να είσαι προσεκτικός που παρουσιάζεις την ιδέα σου. Πρέπει σίγουρα, αν θα δώσεις παραπάνω details, να τους βάλουν να υπογράψουν NDA. Σίγουρα, αν έχεις source code, να πρέπει να το προστατεύσεις. Όμως πάλι να σου πω, η πραγματικότητα είναι ότι χρησιμοποιήσεις subcontractors, για παράδειγμα, να πιάσουν κάποιον που τον κώδικα σου, σίγουρα βάλεις τους να υπογράφουν μια συμφωνία. Εντάξει. Πρέπει να παίρνεις όμως σίγουρα κάποια μέτρα. Αν έχεις κάποιους που είναι υπαλλήλοι σου, σίγουρα πρέπει να προστατεύεις το source code σου. Κάποια μέτρα πρέπει να πάρεις, αλλά you always have a risk of somebody copying you. Σίγουρα. You always have this risk. Αλλά καμιά...
sorry. Ναι,
καμιά φορά και λίγο... Ξέρεις, να μην γίνεσαι όμως και... Ξέρεις, το στυλ, εν παρουσιάζω πουθενά την ιδέα μου, διότι να με αντιγράψω, you will never get an investor anyway. Because investors, they want to, at least I had an experience of a project that was trying to promote with a friend. And they reached the stage where there was an interested investor, he wanted to have more detail, and this investor was quite serious. And it was so obvious that it was a genuine interest, and then the founders said, we don't want to give more details because they might copy us. And that was a dead end, They didn't get the investment. As simple as that. So, you have to be able to judge the point where you stop giving information, or the point, where you have to give some information to get some where you have genuine interest for investors. Investors generally, they're not. If you present to investors, that they're not. They will not copy your idea. It doesn't work like this.
Ωραία. Σε ευχαριστώ πολύ, Μαρία.
Thank you, Stavri.
Νομίζω ότι ολοκληρώσαμε πάνω.
Νομίζω ήταν εξαιρετικά. Σήμερα πάρα πολύ μεγάλο το ενδιαφέρον. Συνήθως έχουμε κόσμο σε αυτές τις εκδηλώσεις, αλλά πρώτη φορά είχαμε τόσο πολύ κόσμο και τους κρατούσαμε τόσο πολύ μια μισή ώρα μετά. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ, Μάρια. Σίγουρα θα σε έχουμε και στο μέλλον. Νομίζω έθιξες πάρα πολλά ζητήματα, στα οποία μπορούσες από μόνα τους να αναλύσεις άλλο τόσο και άλλο τόσο και άλλο τόσο. Και σίγουρα κάποια στιγμή στο μέλλον θα σε έχουμε κοντά μας. Να αναφέρω λίγο μόνο ευκαιρίας ότι αναφέρθηκε το θέμα των μεντόρων, ότι το Κέντρο Επιχειρηματικότητας έχει ένα πολύ σημαντικό, πολύ δυνατό δίκτυο μεντόρων. Ο Μάριος είναι μέρος του δικτύου εδώ και λίγο καιρό και σας ενθαρρύνουμε όλους μας να το χρησιμοποιήσετε αυτό το δίκτυο. Θα σας είναι πολύ χρήσιμο σε οτιδήποτε ιδέα έχετε, οποιαδήποτε ερώτηση έχετε ή οποιαδήποτε βήμα θέλετε να κάνετε στη ζωή σας. Είναι πολύτιμες συμβουλές από ανθρώπους οι οποίοι έχουν βαθιά εμπειρία σε πολύ μεγάλο εύρος επιχειρηματικών θεμάτων. Να ξαναευχαριστήσουμε τον Μάριο τον Δημητριάδη, εξαιρετικός σήμερα, πάρα πολύ διαφημιστικός. Και να ανανεώσουμε το ραντεβού μας κάποια άλλη φορά στο μέλλον.
Καλό βράδυ, ευχαριστώ πολύ. Γεια σας.
Ευχαριστούμε.
Ευχαριστούμε, Ιωάννα.
Γεια σας.